Sam, let's stay with Nebraska here for a second and talk about the stadium renovation kind of news that we got over the last couple days or so, with Troy Dannon kind of reshaping the way that is going to be rolled out, with East and West getting addressed first and South Stadium maybe to come at a later date. What was your reaction to kind of the change of plans as rolled out by Dannon?
Well, he kind of hinted at it 2 weeks before on the radio, and I was listening to that then. So when we kind of heard, well, he wants to talk about this direction, my sense was that it was gonna change a little bit, and it is. And I kind of wrote about it today in my rewind, kind of the framework that I'm bringing to that conversation. There are very few athletic directors who ever would have brought the project that Trev Alberts brought it. And to some degree, I thought Trev brought it because of who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And, he wanted to get that thing done and sort of transform that part of the stadium and create a concourse that went 270 down the stadium and just remake the whole thing so that the fan experience was way, way better. And I think that was something that, Nebraskans tend to be pretty pragmatic. And so the thought process of, so we're going to do this thing and we don't necessarily have the money and we may have to go ask for public money, and Nebraska doesn't do that for its football program. Its football program is a giant money pig that's supposed to do that for everybody else. And so what Trev was suggesting was actually quite bold, and sort of brash in its own way. Like, if we're going to ask for public, I think the thought was we're going to ask for public money. Yes, we are, because this is going to be a great investment going forward, et cetera, et cetera. So it didn't surprise me that Nebraska decided to, take a more pragmatic tack in the process. That doesn't surprise me. I don't think there's any guarantee that South Stadium will be redone. I think that, Nebraska needs to win football games in order to continue to keep the enthusiasm up, and B, it's going to cost even more money if you put it off. And I just don't get the sense that there's a ton of momentum for renovating that and giving the students better seats. And the only way I think that Trev's original vision would have gone forward is if Matt Rule had said, we need to do this thing the way that Trev envisioned it, and I will go out and raise money to get it done that way. And that's just not what Matt Rule did. And I'm not saying he should. I'm saying that, that's probably the way that it could have happened. But I think Matt Rule is quite focused on making sure that Nebraska is competitive in NIL and in roster management. And it's just becoming increasingly clear to me, Ravi, that, Troy Dannon and Matt Rule kind of work with each other, for each other. Mm-hmm. They don't Dannon's not really awesome. So, and that's okay. That's not uncommon. I don't think Greg Byrne was Nick Saban's boss. But Matt Rule's got to win. And to be clear, I think he's going to. But this puts even more stakes on the season. And they have an opportunity this season, and everybody's going to be watching. And it'll be intriguing to see, how it goes.
We're talking with Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, can I make the argument to you that the most pragmatic thing to do, and I understand that there may not be the support for it either spiritually or financially or whatever, but the most pragmatic thing to do may be just to build a new stadium?
Right. So, yeah, that's possible. The challenge with that, Ravi, is they would be building a new stadium on land that wouldn't be controlled by the university. So they'd have to do that either outside of the city, so like on a plot of land. Maybe the university could purchase land and then own the land. That's possible. You can do that. Where would you put it?
Sure.
Where would it be? I'm sure no one from Omaha would complain if it were, right now I'm driving to Omaha. So I am at, let's see, exit 405. So just beyond, I think I'm right out by 56 and where you go to Wahoo.
Yeah.
So Highway 77. So like, could they build it out here? Yeah, they could, and they could put a big village around it and do the whole thing. But that would change the nature of the experience. And
Sure.
very few teams have done that. Baylor did that, and they did it, and they're probably the school that did it. Now you can't really. You'd have to build a brand new stadium. Couldn't tear down the current one like Kansas has. So, they'd have to have one concurrent, and all that. Possible. It's going to cost a lot of money. But if you do it, you can kind of shape it and make it whatever you want it to be. And you can put a monetization village around it. You can put the hotels and you can put the fan villages, and you don't have to try to shoehorn that into it's already existing. That's not a terrible idea, but I just wonder if anybody has the whatever to do it. Like, compare that with an amusement park.
Mm-hmm.
People who have been to Jerry World know that there's a whole bunch of stuff there. It's not just the stadium. Like, how would you package that, and how would you envision it? Would you put a USA Volleyball Training Center there? Like, you'd have to try to bring a whole bunch of things together, and not just the football stadium you use, 7 or 8 times a year.
Sure. Yeah, and the reason I ask is, we look at like the original price tag of the Trev Alberts project, and I have to imagine if you truly modernize Memorial Stadium, it's going to be at least that, if not a few $100 million north of that, and at least at a cost standpoint, to actually modernize or update Memorial Stadium because of the things you have to work around with an old structure like that. From a money standpoint, yeah, it's more upfront than it would be if you kind of roll it out in stages. But from a money standpoint, I don't know that you're talking about a huge amount of difference here.
That's a good point. Yeah. So I think you're probably, it was 450. It would probably be, 700, 800 million. Northwestern's, I think, is 50, and it's going to be smaller than Nebraska would make its stadium. So maybe you're up to $1 billion. But if you do it that way, then maybe you'll be able to say, listen, this is a big project, and we're going to put a bunch of things there, and the public can get its energy and its excitement behind it. Maybe you place it. Now I'm going past Waverly. There's nothing out here. There's very little out here.
Land would be cheap.
There's well, maybe, but yeah, there's there's stuff to do. Like, you could buy the land out here and try to make it work, and build the the interstate infrastructure a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
It'd take a year or two, but create, infrastructure that gets you where you need to go out here. Those are all possibilities. And, somebody's going to have to step up and put a lot of money toward it. And then there probably have to be developers of that area and get something out of it. So, like, there's ways to do that, and it wouldn't. I've heard for years this sort of pipe dream of putting a stadium out on Interstate 80, somewhat, quote unquote, halfway between Lincoln and Omaha, and creating a completely different kind of experience. Simultaneously, there's something special about going to campus.
Sure.
And you'd be taking all that away. Like, it would no longer be a campus event. It would become it's no longer really a full Saturday even. It's more just a football game on a Saturday. So, they'd have to consider all those things. But it may not be the worst idea financially. In some ways, it'd be easier because you don't have to make a bunch of compromises. You can build your vision from scratch.
Well, and I think it would be a kind of microcosm of, it would feel a lot different. It would be a lot different than going to campus on a Saturday, but it would also maybe be sort of ushering in this new era of like, hey, college football is a professional sport. Like, it feels a lot more like a professional sports idea than it does a college campus idea. And maybe I guess maybe that's the point.
For sure. And I think that's absolutely true. Again, that a lot of these places will, and NFL stadiums that pay for themselves a little bit more because you get more home games and there's some other things going on. Nebraska would have to find a way to pay for it. A,
mm-hmm.
and B, they probably have to put a roof on it. So if you put a roof on it, then all of a sudden you're functional all year round, and you can have some other stuff in there. You can have a monster truck rally, you know, on December 18th. You can have, you know, a concert, a big concert, some other things. But, you know, I know there's interest in putting grass at Memorial Stadium. Robbie, it's just a really interesting time, because what I'll say is that I think Nebraska has a football coach who has the ideas and the personality and the leverage to kind of get what he wants and like get people on his side too. Like Bo may have wanted some things, but Bo had a hard time communicating that to everybody because of his personality. And Rhule's got a great personality and a winning one, and he's able to kind of, you know, build relationships. He also has a lot of leverage. I think everybody's kind of gotten to the point where it's like, okay, well, Scott Frost didn't work, and so this is the guy, and so if he wants it, we better get it from him. And so he's got some momentum that I think some other coaches at the school haven't had, and so I think he's got an opportunity to, you know, maybe there will be grass in Memorial Stadium, or so maybe he'll get some things that surprise us, and that may not have been true of even Frost. There's just, again, at this point, there's an impression of like, Nebraska got a coach that a lot of people wanted, and if he wanted to go somewhere else, he probably could. So let's make this guy happen. And so I think, and Troy Dannon, who is you know, an old school sort of built his career from virtually the very beginning jobs up to this point, he knows, and he's cut from very similar cloth as Rhule. And I'm telling you right now, Troy Dannon has built his career on service. In other words, being of service to his coaches. He will be a coach's AD. I don't know that Trev Alberts always was. I think he was to some degree, but I don't think Trev Alberts was always like, you know, the coach's best friend. Sometimes he was the one who was telling the coach something the coach didn't want to hear. I don't know that Dannon will be doing a lot of that. I think he probably built his career on building really good relationships with coaches, and I don't know if there'll be a lot of creative tension in the room. I think there will be we're going to try to get you what you need, and then, you know, go from there. And that's a more traditional setup than we've seen. That honestly, I mean, you know, it's just a traditional setup, and not a bad one. I think it's probably a pretty effective one for where Nebraska football is right now.
It certainly seems like Trev Alberts had more of his own. And this word has negative connotations, but I don't necessarily mean it that way. He had more of his own personal agenda of what he was trying to accomplish, where Troy Dannon really seems like he's there, like you said, to sort of service the agenda of Matt Rhule more than anything else.
I think that's fair. I would say that the back half of what you said is accurate. I think Trev you could say it was Trev's personal goal. But some of the stuff that he wanted was honestly designed to, you know, thank the fans. There were just moments within his tenure where I think he was just like, you know, the fans haven't gotten a good shake here. They haven't always had a fair deal in the stadium, and how they deserve it. So we're gonna redo this, and we're gonna redo South Stadium and give the students a better place to sit. You know, the students don't. There's a thing that's embedded in Nebraska. They're going to show up because they always show up, and Nebraska fans will show up forever because they'll always show up. And I try to tell people showing up because there's just generations of people where that's what they do. Those generations stop with my generation. They do. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm a late Gen Xer. So I'm 46. I think I'm 46. Sometimes forget. So I'm a very late Gen Xer. And then, you know, my wife is an early millennial. So she's 43, 44. And so that generation is the generation with which it stops. And I just don't think people, I think most of the power brokers over there are like in the boomer, or they're either, you know, early Gen X or late boomer. I don't think they get it yet. We're about 5 years away. We're about 5 to 7 years away from the fans just being like, you know what? No. And I don't mean for basketball. Basketball, they'll show up because basketball's kind of fun. for 2 hours. You can stuff your face with some food. You get a cup holder. The kids kind of like it. There's T-shirts being shot into the crowd. You get a seat. People will go because that's a family thing. And they'll start, like, they go to women's basketball, too. That's what I do with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And volleyball's not going anywhere. And baseball's going to stay that way because there's always about 6,000 people that like watching baseball for the sake of watching baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking specifically football. And football's become, on a Saturday, to be able to sit and surround yourself with 3 TVs, bet on all the games you want. If you're a Twitter person, you can watch Twitter. If you're, a chat person, you can do that. You got your own bathroom. You got your own cooler of beers. You got your own snacks. And I'm just telling people, like, it's about 5 to 7 years away from those people from South Stadium being 2/3 empty. Mm. And now they can win and they can fill it up, Ravi, and that's what they need to do. But they're not going to keep coming if the team only wins 5 or 6 games every year because, somebody over there thinks that they should. And so I think that's an area where Trev actually was kind of trying to see around the corner and realizing that there's a whole generation of folks. They like the Huskers, but they're not going down there to sit on a seat that's 19 inches wide and you don't even get beer because out of loyalty. They're not. The subsequent generations after me are not into that kind of loyalty. And so when Damon was marveling about that on Thursday, I'm like, yes, it is remarkable, and it's waning.
Yeah,
it's not going to be here forever. So I assume they know that, but sometimes I wonder a little bit, and so I guess we're going to find out.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point that I think a lot of people are kind of afraid to say out loud is that, unless you do have that sort of brush with greatness kind of once a generation, then you do start to lose contact with the things that made Nebraska special a little bit. And so, let's say for whatever reason, they don't have that run of success. I think you're right. I think they are in real danger of losing that undying loyalty. But on the other side of it, if this thing goes the way obviously Matt Rule and company hope it does, and they get into, let's say, a college football playoff in the next 2 or 3 years, how does that change the dynamic of what's going on in Lincoln?
It changes it completely. You
can get whatever you want, right? I mean, at that point, really?
Yeah. I think more fans will start, they'll be engaged at least. I think the fan experience still isn't awesome, but I think you'll get a deeper engagement from those subsequent younger generations that may remember when Nebraska was good when they were like 9, and they want that feeling again, and they want to introduce their kids to it. And so, I think that's coming. I think that if they can win big, that's something that I think that people will feel and go forth with. But again, that means winning. And I think Rule knows that for sure. He knows it, and Damon does too. And I think their plan is to win big and to restore Nebraska where it needs to be competitively. And in doing that, it will preserve, the fan base. It'll preserve what's special about it and the loyal support. I'm just saying they got about 5 to 7 years back where they've got to win in the next 5 to 7 years. This isn't let's do this for another 12 years and trust that everybody will keep coming and that the same boosters that have been purchasing the season tickets that don't get sold will keep doing that out of the goodness of their own heart, or that when some of those folks no longer do it, that the children they pass the money on to are going to keep doing that. I don't think that. I think Trev was starting to run into that, to be honest with you. He had some people who were really big benefactors, of some UNO projects. Some of those people had passed away and passed on. And I think some of the people who took over those funds, it just wasn't their passion, nor does it have to be. And so I think there was going to be some, one of the things that we had talked about is, well, what's going to be the next generation of donors in Nebraska, and who are they going to be? And not just one group, but like the 10 or 12 people. And I think that's the area that'll just be something worth watching. Like who's going to be the big benefactor going forward? Are there people out there with a bunch of hedge fund money? And some of these schools have hedge funders and
Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Good stuff as always, Sam. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, take care.